Officer Carter had only one rule: never let fear dictate your actions. For 20 years, that principle guided every decision, every mission in foreign lands where the line between trust and treachery was razor thin. But here, on a lonely highway in rural Montana, Carter never expected to meet a power-hungry deputy with a thirst for control and a twisted sense of justice. Now an unwarranted stop has escalated into a manhunt. A decorated Air Force major sits in a county jail on baseless charges, and the man who orchestrated it all believes he's above consequence. Yet what he doesn't realize is that Carter isn't just another citizen to bully. Carter is a special tactics commander, taught to adapt, to overcome, and to strike back when cornered. The entire precinct is about to learn that while badges may grant authority, they do not grant invulnerability. And in this town, the real fight for justice has only just begun. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. Carter could still feel the sting of hot desert sand in the corners of memory, the ghost of old missions where every second mattered. That thought flickered in the back of the mind while steering through the dusky Montana road. A phone call had come in the previous evening, someone with a voice full of desperation, choking on tears, begging Carter for help. It was a longtime family friend, a Vietnam vet named Edgar Miles, whose granddaughter had been unjustly detained on her way home from a late-night shift. Carter had seen the same story play out too many times in foreign conflict zones, where those with power toyed with those without. Now it was happening here, on American soil, under the guise of law enforcement, and Carter, as always, could not stand by and watch. The highway was empty, all gray asphalt and flickers of passing headlights from distant oncoming cars. A swirl of dust trailed in the rearview mirror. It was nearly sunset, that fleeting hour when the sky blazed orange and pink, but the beauty of the scenery offered no comfort. This remote stretch of road was rumored to be the playground of Deputy Richard "Rick" Hastings, a man with a grin like a wolf and a reputation for making trouble vanish. People whispered about him, about entire families who vanished from town after trifling with him. Gossip said he grew up around people in high places, judges, attorneys, fellow officers, connections that gave him a shield stronger than a Kevlar vest. Carter had no doubt that Hastings believed himself unassailable. But no man was invulnerable, and that was the truth Carter carried like a loaded sidearm. No squad cars appeared in the rearview yet. Carter would have welcomed one just to cut the tension. But as the sun dipped lower, a figure emerged on the right shoulder. A man in uniform stepping into the road with a flashlight, motioning for Carter to pull over. There was no immediate reason for the stop. No traffic violation had occurred. Carter slowed the SUV and eased onto the shoulder, feeling a tightness coiling in the gut. The last remnants of warm sunlight gilded the gravel as Carter rolled the window down, calmly aware that the real trouble might be about to start. Deputy Hastings strode up with a confident swagger, a magazine cover grin plastered on his face. He was tall, broad, and had the unmistakable posture of someone used to intimidation tactics. His flashlight beam cut across Carter's face, lingering in an insulting way. The man wore that smile like a challenge. "License and registration," he barked, ignoring the small courtesy of a greeting. Carter handed them over without a word, deliberately keeping all motions slow, non-threatening. Something flickered in Hastings's gaze. A twinge of curiosity at the name, or maybe the rank he saw on Carter's retired military ID. He stepped back a fraction, scanning the documents, lips curling in something that might have been amusement. "Major Stephen Carter," he read aloud, relishing the syllables in a mocking tone. "Air Force, huh? Retired? Or is it active reserve?" "Retired from active duty, still on call for special assignments," Carter answered. Hastings gave a low chuckle. "Sounds fancy. Where you headed in such a hurry?" Carter could feel the hooks being laid out, the officer fishing for contradictory statements. "I'm going to see a friend in the local jail, hoping to speak with the sheriff." Hastings cocked an eyebrow, that smug grin widening. "Interesting. You know our sheriff personally?" Carter met his eyes calmly. "I'll know him soon enough." That seemed to amuse Hastings, who regarded the license again. Well, you see, folks around here follow certain rules. You can't just waltz in and do whatever you please. And it so happens you're driving a vehicle matching a description in an ongoing investigation. The claim felt contrived. Carter let silence linger a beat, refusing to be baited. Hastings's grin strained, as if he disliked not getting an immediate reaction. Finally, Carter asked, "And what investigation would that be?" The deputy made a show of clipping Carter's documents onto a small metal board. Local break-ins, vandals, maybe more. We got a call about a suspicious SUV and yours kinda matches the color, so step out, let me take a quick look. It was the exact scenario Carter had expected from everything Edgar Miles had described. Hastings thrived on intimidation, had built a small empire of fear. Many locals felt powerless. Carter, on the other hand, knew precisely how to handle bullies. Exhaling slowly, Carter pushed open the door and got out, mentally noting the distance between them, measuring the environment. The temperature felt cooler now that the sun had all but disappeared, leaving only a faint afterglow on the horizon. Hastings circled the SUV, running his flashlight over the doors, the tires, the trunk. "Pop it open," he ordered, gesturing at the back. Carter's jaw tightened. "Have you got a warrant?" He let out a sharp laugh. "A warrant? Don't need that if I have probable cause. And your probable cause is the color of my car?" "You're acting nervous," he shot back, smirk deepening. "Anyway, it won't take long if you cooperate." Carter weighed the options. Stand firm, refuse, possibly escalate. Or buy time, gather evidence, see just how far Hastings would go. Carter recalled the heartbreak in Edgar's voice, remembered the promise made. End this cycle of corruption. For that to happen, everything had to be documented, beyond question, or he said, they said, arguments. Carter offered a thin smile. "Go ahead and take a look, deputy." Hastings opened the trunk, rummaging around with deliberate roughness. A duffel bag was tossed aside, personal items upended. Carter kept an eye on him, noticing how he paused over a certain bag, fished around as though hoping to discover something incriminating. Finally, Hastings slammed it shut. "Nothing in here," he muttered, frustration creeping into his voice. He shoved the trunk down with unnecessary force. "We'll run your plates, talk with dispatch, see what they have to say. Don't move." He stalked back to his patrol car, leaving Carter standing alone on the roadside. The air felt charged, brimming with the tension of a confrontation far from over. A few distant headlights appeared and vanished along the highway, none slowing to investigate. Carter breathed steadily, mindful of the next step. In the distance, Hastings made a show of talking into his radio. Moments later, he emerged again, face stern. "Seems the registration is valid, no outstanding warrants," he admitted, sounding almost disappointed. "But I got other reasons to bring you in for questioning. Step to the back of your vehicle, hands behind your head." Carter's heart thudded once in anger, and those reasons would be? Hastings took a deliberate step closer, his presence looming. "Your attitude, your refusal to comply with a lawful request earlier. Interfering with an investigation, reckless driving, possibly. I can add resisting arrest if you make this hard." Carter let the words hang. It was a blatant abuse of authority, an attempt to provoke fear. 1,000 quick retorts tumbled through the mind, but Carter held them in check. Instead, there was calm acceptance. "I'm not resisting, but I do want to phone my attorney if you're arresting me." He barked a laugh. "Sure. You can call the president for all I care, after I book you in." Carter thought of a conversation from the previous night. Edgar's granddaughter, who'd tried to stand up for her rights and ended up battered, behind bars on made-up charges. This was the same script. Recycled intimidation. Carter slowly placed both hands behind the head, stepping toward the SUV's tailgate. Hastings grabbed Carter's wrists, locking on the cuffs. The metal pinched tight. "Now, Major, you'll see what real law enforcement looks like in these parts." His breath brushed Carter's ear, the words laced with smug triumph. "You ain't in the Middle East now. Here, I'm in charge." Carter turned just enough to catch his eye. "Maybe you should read a little deeper into who you're messing with." That remark left Hastings momentarily uncertain, but he covered it with a sneer, marching Carter toward the patrol car. The routine pat-down was aggressive, verging on assault. Carter gritted teeth against the indignity. Then, with a rough shove, the deputy guided Carter into the back seat. The door slammed shut with a metallic thunk that echoed finality. Through the window cage, Carter watched Hastings swagger to the driver's seat, tension coiling in the pit of Carter's stomach. The patrol car roared onto the highway. Darkness enveloped them, headlights carving an arc across the lonely road. Carter stared out at the open expanse, ignoring the triumphant hum the deputy let slip from the front seat. The wheels were in motion, and there was no turning back. If Hastings thought it would be easy to bury this, to treat Carter like just another unfortunate soul without the means to fight back, he was about to be painfully enlightened. At the station, a squat concrete building set off from the main street. Hastings pulled around to a side entrance. Carter glimpsed a handful of patrol cars in the lot, dimly lit by overhead lamps. The deputy dragged Carter out, ignoring any request to retrieve personal belongings from the SUV. "Keep moving," he growled. Carter complied, letting the scenario unfold. Documentation would come later. Inside, the station smelled of stale coffee and old sweat. A front desk clerk glanced up with bored eyes, then did a double take at Carter's uniform pants, boots, and the crisp jacket now rumpled by the scuffle. The clerk opened his mouth to ask something, but Hastings shot a glare that silenced him. They bypassed the booking area, heading straight down a short corridor that ended in a cramped interrogation room. He shoved Carter inside, flipping on the fluorescent light that buzzed overhead. "Sit," he barked, directing Carter to a metal chair at a battered table. He stood, arms folded across his chest. A tense moment passed. "What exactly are the charges, deputy?" Carter inquired, voice level. "I'd like them read to me, as is my legal right." He shrugged. "You're being detained for questioning related to an active investigation. That's all you need to know." The heavy silence that followed was a test of wills. Carter recognized the technique. Keep the detainee in the dark, isolate them, break them psychologically. But Carter had survived far harsher interrogations overseas, in scenarios where not cooperating meant far worse than a night in county lockup. This was child's play by comparison. Minutes dragged on. Hastings stepped out briefly, presumably to consult with someone or perhaps to contact the local sheriff. Carter remained calm, wrists still cuffed, mind calculating. Eventually, the door swung open again. Another officer, this one with Sergeant Bradley on his nameplate, walked in. He was older, close to retirement age maybe, with a set to his mouth that spoke of weariness, as though he'd seen too many corners cut. He looked Carter up and down, brow furrowing. "You're the retired Air Force guy Hastings brought in," he muttered. "Mind telling me your side?" Before Carter could speak, Hastings reappeared with that same swagger. "No need. I've got everything under control, Sarge." "This one matches a suspect's description from the break-ins." Carter cut in quietly. "When do I get my phone call?" Hastings ignored it. Sergeant Bradley sighed. "Rick, the station just got word from dispatch. There's no APB matching this man's description or his SUV. You want to clarify?" Hastings bristled. The suspect from earlier was described as tall, wearing dark clothing, and he's a match. Carter gave a slow blink. "I'm in a tan jacket, deputy." Bradley's gaze swung to Hastings for a beat, then back to Carter. "Is that right?" Hastings' jaw tightened. "Look, he's interfering with an ongoing investigation. He got mouthy out on the highway, refused to let me search his trunk." Again, Carter calmly interrupted. "I gave consent. You found nothing. You've offered no real charge except vague suspicion." Bradley set a hand on his belt. "Rick, do you have evidence that justifies booking him?" Hastings opened his mouth to retort, then snapped it shut. For a second, Carter glimpsed uncertainty in the deputy's eyes. Then he hardened again. "Let's say resisting an officer and for failure to comply with a lawful directive. That's enough to keep him overnight while we do more checks." Bradley looked unconvinced, but he gave a reluctant nod. "Fine, book him. But if this bites us in the backside, it's on your head." Hastings forced a grin. "Trust me, Sarge." With that, Bradley left, shutting the door behind him, Hastings turned to Carter, triumphant. See how easy that was? Carter inhaled slowly. You're stepping on a landmine, deputy. You might not see it yet, but you are. He bared his teeth in a predatory smile. I've heard that before. Never mattered. What Hastings couldn't see was that Carter had slid a phone free from an ankle pocket the moment the interrogation started. It was a habit from active duty. Always have a backup device. Hidden from his vantage, Carter had already texted a single coded message to someone with significant resources. If Hastings wanted to play the long game, Carter's allies would respond in kind, turning the tide. But first, Carter needed to endure the show. Hastings marched Carter to the booking area, where a board officer on night shift took the fingerprints. The deputy hovered like a hawk, making sure no casual conversation happened. Then they confiscated personal items, rummaging through Carter's pockets, removing the official phone, wallet, anything else. Carter's backup device remained secreted away, tucked into a specialized pocket. Once the process ended, Hastings led Carter down another corridor to a row of holding cells. The cell was claustrophobic, concrete walls painted a sickly pale green, a single cot, a small metal toilet in the corner, dim overhead light. Hastings locked the door with an audible clang. Get comfortable, soldier boy, he taunted. You might be here a while. Carter walked to the cot, ignoring the deputy. The stale air smelled faintly of bleach and desperation. Footsteps retreated, the corridor lights flickered, and then the cell block fell silent except for distant hums of machinery. Carter sat carefully, taking stock. The cuffs were off now, but there was little else to do except wait. In the calm, Carter's mind drifted to the phone. Had the message gone through? If so, how quickly would help arrive? And, more importantly, how many others around here were in the same predicament but lacked the means or connections to fight back? A faint sound drifted from a nearby cell. A muffled sob. Carter stood, moved to the bars, peering down the corridor. Another occupant, a young woman, huddled behind her own set of bars. She wore a diner uniform, the name tag glinting, Nina. Her face was swollen, one eye bruised. When she noticed Carter watching, she shrank back. Carter spoke softly. You okay? She hesitated, glancing around as though expecting an officer to yell at her. Finally, she whispered, I tried to argue with them about the tip money they said I stole from a customer. It was my own wages. They said I was obstructing justice. Her voice cracked. I was just trying to go home. Carter's jaw tightened. Deputy Hastings do that to you? She nodded, tears threatening. Me and another officer. They said they'd charge me with theft and assault unless I kept quiet. Anger churned in Carter's chest, but the voice stayed gentle. I'll do everything I can to get us both out of here. I promise. Nina managed a tearful nod, voice wavering with exhaustion. Thank you. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, cutting off the conversation. The overhead lights buzzed harshly, and in the corridor a shadow appeared. Another deputy, heavy-set, with a thick mustache. He didn't say a word, just glared in Carter's direction before continuing on his way. Carter stepped back from the bars, letting the moment pass. Nina turned away, sinking onto her cot. The station returned to uneasy silence. Time crawled. Carter leaned back on the cot, mind replaying years of special tactics training. How to maintain psychological control in captivity, how to read guard routines. Each second waiting felt like an eternity. If the message had reached the right people, soon the wheels of real justice would begin turning. In the meantime, Carter needed to remain calm, to gather any further evidence that could be used to dismantle the corruption rotting away inside this precinct. Eventually, exhaustion tugged at eyelids. Carter let them close, drifting in and out of a shallow doze. The night wore on. Occasionally, an officer would shuffle past, glance into the cell, and move along. Carter studied each face, memorizing features, looking for who might be complicit. Some stared with contempt, others with shame. Not one offered assistance. Morning came in a slow creep of pale sunlight through high, barred windows. Carter woke to the clatter of keys. Hastings stood outside the cell, arms folded. Rise and shine, he said with mock cheer. Time for your official statement. Carter got to feet, ignoring the ache in stiff muscles. You'll let me call a lawyer first. Sure, he said breezily, right after you sign the paperwork confirming your wrongdoing. Carter bit back the immediate retort. Instead, a cold smile. Lead the way. He unlocked the cell, gesturing with his chin. Carter stepped out into the corridor, noticing Nina was gone. That hammered home the sense of urgency. Where had they taken her? The possibility that Hastings or some other crooked cop had done something worse twisted Carter's stomach. But no chance to ask now. The deputy prodded Carter forward. In the interrogation room, there was no sign of Sergeant Bradley or any other officers who might see reason. Instead, a younger deputy with a permanent scowl stood off to the side. Hastings threw a file on the metal table. The fluorescent light still buzzed overhead, pressing on the senses. Have a seat, Hastings said almost pleasantly. Carter did so, clasping hands on the table. We're going to keep this simple. You sign a statement acknowledging you resisted a lawful stop. You pay a fine, and maybe you walk out of here with a misdemeanor on your record. That's the best deal you'll get. Carter studied him, voice measured. And if I refuse? Hastings's grin was predatory. We keep you locked up pending further investigation. That could take weeks, maybe months. Meanwhile, your SUV gets impounded. Your job prospects go down the drain. Not a good look for a what was it? Oh yeah, a so-called Special Assignment Air Force retiree? The younger deputy shifted, looking almost uncomfortable. Carter caught the movement from the corner of an eye, but said nothing about it. Instead, Carter replied, I'd like a lawyer. Now. Hastings slammed a palm on the metal table, causing a sharp clang. Listen, you arrogant... A knock at the door interrupted him, harsh and urgent. The young deputy opened it a crack, revealing the anxious face of the desk clerk. He mumbled something about a phone call, something urgent, and that the caller is from the Department of Justice. Hastings stiffened, glare darting to Carter. Who told them to call here? He demanded. The clerk stumbled over words. They said they want to speak to the officer in charge of holding Major Stephen Carter. Said it's official business. Hastings looked torn between rage and fear, but he quickly set his jaw, tried to contain his reaction. Patch it through to the private line in the sheriff's office. I'll take it. He snatched the file from the table, shot Carter a venomous stare, and stomped out. The young deputy hovered, uncertain, then followed. Carter sat, heart pounding but outwardly calm. So the cavalry was arriving, faster than expected. The call from the Department of Justice suggested that Carter's network had indeed taken the message seriously. That was one advantage of having spent years forging connections with people who believed in real justice and accountability. If Hastings thought strong-arming would suffice, he was about to experience a rude awakening. Minutes later, Hastings stormed back in, face pale but furious. You're free to go, he spat, words dripping with bitterness. Get out of my station. Carter stood, deliberately smoothing out the rumpled jacket. Just like that? No apology? His hand twitched at his belt. Don't push your luck, Major. Carter nodded once. Fine, but you can be certain you'll hear from my attorney, and quite possibly from the DOJ. Hastings said nothing, stepping aside to allow Carter into the corridor. He signaled the young deputy to return Carter's personal belongings. Carter reclaimed the phone, wallet, keys. Then, with cool composure, walked out of the station into the clear morning light. Despite the short taste of freedom, Carter didn't plan on leaving town. There was a mission here: unravel Hastings' hold on people. Let him stew, let him make the next move. Carter was prepared. Outside, an old pickup truck rumbled to a stop near the station's entrance. The driver hopped out, a woman wearing a crisp black suit and a flash of a government badge. She flicked her gaze to Carter. Major Carter? He nodded. She lowered her voice. I'm Agent Natalie Price, Department of Justice. I got an urgent call from some friends of yours. Want to give me a quick rundown before I go in? And so, on the station steps, Carter recounted the harassment, the bogus charges, the manhandling. Agent Price listened intently, expression growing colder. She glanced at the building with a determined glint in her eye. I'll see what I can do to expedite. But from what I hear, folks in this county have tried to file complaints for a while. It never sticks. Most are scared. The sheriff might be compromised, local judges too. My boss wants me to gather evidence. You up for a little collaboration? Carter felt a surge of relief. Absolutely. Bryce nodded. All right, I'll be in touch soon, but Hastings won't be happy you have outside backup. Watch your back. With that, she strode inside, shoulders squared. Carter exhaled, scanning the small parking lot for any sign of trouble. The SUV was still parked out back, presumably rummaged through. Carefully, Carter circled to retrieve it, heart hammering in a mix of anger and resolve. A single call from the DOJ was enough to secure a sudden release, but that also meant Hastings and whoever was protecting him had deeper roots, able to stifle or ignore local complaints. This time, though, they'd chosen the wrong target. After collecting the SUV, Carter drove away from the station, mind racing. Edgar Miles's granddaughter had presumably been released earlier, or perhaps they'd moved her to another facility. Nina was also missing from her cell. The plan was to track them down, gather statements, coordinate with Agent Price. Step by step, piece by piece, the fortress Hastings had built would collapse. But it would require stealth, evidence, and the willingness of the victims to speak out. Carter found a room in the nearest motel, a roadside place with an old neon sign blinking vacancy. The clerk at the front desk stared wide-eyed at Carter's disheveled condition, but asked no questions. Inside the small room, Carter double-locked the door and sank onto the edge of the bed. The phone rang almost immediately. Carter recognized the number and answered. A familiar voice, deep and calm. "You all right?" "Colonel Anders," Carter said, letting out a tired breath. A longtime mentor from the days of specialized field ops. "I'm fine. Hastings tried to hold me, but the DOJ intervened." "How soon can you get resources out here?" Anders didn't hesitate. "We've got people stateside with legal and investigative backgrounds. They're on standby. Just give me the word." "Word given," Carter said quietly. "This place is a hotbed of corruption. Locals are scared silent. We'll need to coordinate with the feds." A pause on the line. "You sure about diving into this, Major? Could get messy. Might drag your name through the mud." "I made a promise," Carter replied, voice firm. "I don't walk away." Another pause. Then Anders's voice softened. "All right. Contact me if you need immediate backup. Meanwhile, I'll push any intel your way." The call ended. Carter stared at the outdated wallpaper, the swirl of fatigue pressing in. The mission was plain: dismantle Hastings' network from within. With the DOJ's help, yes, but local hearts and minds were equally important. Carter needed a foothold in the community, a way to show them it was safe to speak. Sometime later, fresh from a quick shower and changed clothes, Carter left the motel, driving into the center of the small town. It consisted of a single main street lined with angled parking spaces, a few shops, a diner, a bar, and the county courthouse. People strolled with a guarded wariness, as if always checking over their shoulders. Carter found the diner, Hazel's Eats, read the sign in chipped paint. The manager was an older woman with kind eyes. She approached warily as Carter entered. "You're not from here," she said, wiping her hands on an apron. "Welcome. Can I get you anything?" Carter offered a polite smile. "Just a coffee. Black, please." She poured it. "That'll be $1. Carter handed over cash, glancing around. "I'm looking for Nina. She works here, right?" Suspicion flickered across the manager's face. She's out right now. Who's asking?" Carter understood the reluctance. "A friend. I heard she had some trouble with the deputy last night." The manager's eyes widened in alarm. She dropped her gaze, then leaned in. "Nina's at home, recovering. Bruises. The poor thing's terrified." "Would you pass a message that I'd like to help?" Carter asked softly, scribbling a phone number on a napkin. "I know about Hastings. I have connections that might keep her safe if she's willing to come forward." She eyed the napkin, clearly torn. Finally, she gave a tight nod. "If she calls, you better promise you'll protect her." Carter nodded. sincerity etched in every word. That's exactly what I intend. With that, Carter left, feeling the weight of the manager's cautious hope. Next stop was the address Edgar had given. He'd mentioned his granddaughter was staying with him temporarily, so Carter drove down a winding side street that led to a small house on a patch of land dotted with old trucks and rusted farm equipment. The porch light was on, even though it was midday, and the door hung ajar as if someone forgot to close it. Carter rapped on the frame. "Edgar? It's Carter. You home?" A moment later, the old Vietnam vet shuffled to the door, his face lit with relief. "Stephen Carter. God, I was worried they got you too." Carter stepped inside. "They tried. The DOJ made a timely call." Edgar managed a sad smile. "I told you that badge bullies everyone. They locked up my granddaughter for 2 days before letting her go. Look at her." Across the tiny living room, a young woman with tired eyes and a wrapped wrist sat on a battered sofa. She offered a wan smile. "Jessie Miles." Carter walked over, kneeling down to greet her softly. "Heard about what happened. You all right?" She nodded, but tears brimmed. "I'm out, but they threatened to come back if I told anyone. You can't trust half the folks in this county. They're either on Hastings's payroll or too scared to cross him." Carter set a reassuring hand on her good arm. "I promise, there are people on our side. Federal agents. Once we gather enough evidence, Hastings won't be able to bury it." Jesse's jaw trembled. He said if I squealed, I'd regret it, that he'd make my life real painful. Edgar's hand balled into a fist. Damn him. If I were 20 years younger. Carter glanced between them. "We do this smart. We follow legal channels. We get statements, documentation, medical reports." Jessie inhaled, clearly trying to steady herself. "He assaulted me. Not just me. There's a whole line of people with stories, but everyone's terrified." Carter understood all too well the power of fear. "I'll talk to the DOJ. We'll arrange witness protection if needed, but I'll need you to give an official statement." She swallowed, nodded. "I will." Edgar placed a hand on Carter's shoulder. "Thank you, kid. I knew if anyone could stand up to that monster, it'd be you." Their conversation was cut short by the sudden roar of an engine outside. Through the window, Carter spotted a black SUV with tinted windows rolling to a stop at the far end of the drive. The door opened, revealing a man in a suit that was all business. He stepped out, scanning the property, then lifted a hand in greeting. Carter's tension eased. It wasn't Hastings. Probably someone from Colonel Anders's network, or from the DOJ. Carter hurried to the porch to greet him. "Major Carter?" the man asked, approaching with a respectful dip of the head. "I'm Davis. Colonel Anders said you needed operational support out here." Carter nodded. "Glad to have you. Let's get your vehicle hidden. No sense giving the deputies an easy target." Davis smirked. "Wise. I brought a team. Discreetly. We'll coordinate with the feds." As Davis parked behind a patch of overgrown shrubbery, Carter led him inside, introduced him to Edgar and Jessie. Plans formed quickly. If the local authorities were compromised, the best approach was to rely on federal resources. Davis had equipment for discreetly recording witness statements, body cams that could gather proof of intimidation, plus a secure communication link to push everything to the DOJ. Edgar listened, eyes wide, as Carter and Davis outlined the strategy. But even as Carter laid out the steps, an uneasy feeling nagged. Hastings was no fool. If he'd brushed off smaller threats for years, he wouldn't hesitate to apply heavier pressure now. That meant they needed to move quickly, gather evidence, and force the system's hand before the deputies' goons could clamp down or destroy crucial documents. Davis handed Jessie a small pen-like recorder. "If Hastings or any of his officers threaten you again, press this button. It'll capture audio. Keep it hidden. The second anything incriminating is said, we'll have it." She stared at the device like it was a lifeline, then nodded, tears brimming. "Thank you." They agreed to reconvene that evening in a safe location. Carter and Davis left in separate vehicles, hoping to avoid attracting suspicion by traveling together. On the way out, Carter scanned the streets, hyper-alert for any sign of a patrol car or plainclothes watchers. The town felt oppressive despite its quaintness. A solitary uniformed officer stood near the local pharmacy, arms folded, eyes flicking over passing cars. Carter recognized him from the station, one of Hastings's subordinates. The moment the SUV passed, the officer lifted a radio to his lips, murmuring something. So they were being watched, no doubt. Carter maintained a normal speed, refusing to show fear or jumpiness. Let them watch. The more they monitored Carter, the more time Davis and the others had to set up quietly. The real danger would come if Hastings tried to speed up his intimidation, or if he recognized how close they were to building a solid federal case. Carter's phone buzzed. It was Agent Price. "I made some inquiries," she said briskly. "The local sheriff's seat is vacant. The previous sheriff retired suddenly, and an interim is in place, Sheriff Mills, who apparently relies heavily on Hastings. This entire place stinks. I'd like you to come down to the station again, but only if you're comfortable. I have the authority to keep them from detaining you, but you know how it goes in small-town law." Carter drummed fingers on the wheel. "I'll do it if necessary, but they'll likely stonewall us. Let's aim for official interviews with them tomorrow morning. By then, I hope to have more statements from the citizens." Price seemed to weigh the risk. "Fair enough. In the meantime, watch your six, Carter. If Hastings gets cornered, he might lash out violently." "I've dealt with worse," Carter replied, but a chill crept in nonetheless. The call ended, leaving an uneasy hush in the vehicle. The day wore on. Carter rendezvoused with Davis and a couple more plainclothes allies who'd arrived under the radar. They set up in an abandoned mechanics shop on the outskirts of town, where years of dust and disuse made for a perfect hideaway. Carter's SUV was hidden behind the building. A single overhead light cast a dim glow on the dusty concrete floor. Davis unrolled a blueprint of the station's layout, a rough sketch gleaned from local records. "All detainees pass through here," he tapped a corridor. "The evidence room is upstairs, next to the records department. If Hastings is forging or destroying complaints, that's where he'll do it." Carter nodded. "We might need an infiltration to copy or photograph any files, but that's risky. A subpoena is safer if we can get the DOJ or a federal judge to sign off. Problem is, local judges might be on Hastings' side." Davis rubbed the back of his neck. "We could attempt a nighttime infiltration if we have no other choice. I brought gear for a quiet operation, but obviously official channels would be cleaner." They were interrupted by the creak of the door. Edgar entered, a worried expression etched in his lined face. "My granddaughter said 2 deputies showed up at our place asking where she was. When I told them she was resting, they tried to push in. I had to brandish my old service revolver to keep them off the porch." Carter's eyes narrowed. "They're escalating." Edgar nodded, voice shaky with anger. "I can't do that again. I'm an old man. They might claim I threatened them." Carter placed a hand on his shoulder. "Okay, you and Jesse come here tonight. We'll keep watch." Davis quickly agreed. "Safer with us than alone at home." Edgar exhaled relief. "Thank you. I'll bring her by sundown." When he left, Davis gestured to the blueprint again. "They're on the offensive. We need to push forward faster. Let's gather statements from Nina and others tonight, then get them to Price so she can escalate with the DOJ." Carter checked the phone. No calls from Nina yet. Possibly she was still too scared, or maybe at a hospital. Carter tapped out a quick text to the diner manager, requesting a meeting after closing time. The plan was set. By nightfall, they'd hopefully have enough witness accounts to corner Hastings and ensure the FBI or the DOJ could come in with bigger guns blazing. Twilight fell, painting the sky in bruised purples. Carter, along with Davis and a second agent named Mills, no relation to the interim sheriff, staked out behind Hazel's Eats. The diner was shutting down, lights flickering off inside, the last customers trickling out. The manager, that same older woman, slipped out the back door and approached with timid steps. "You Carter?" she asked, voice hushed. Carter nodded. She glanced over at Davis and Mills, uncertain. "They're with me, ma'am. We're here to help. Is Nina with you?" She shook her head. "She's hiding with a relative in the next county, but I have her phone number. She said she'll talk. if she's guaranteed protection. That's exactly what we want, Carter assured. Can you arrange for her to meet us discreetly? I think so. She finishes her shift tomorrow but might be able to come after midnight. She's terrified. She said Hastings threatened to pin drug charges on her if she went public. Davis grimaced. We can get her into a federal witness protection program, but we need a formal statement first. Let's do it tomorrow, early morning, in a safe location. The mechanic's shop on Route 5. Here's the address. The manager took the small slip of paper with trembling fingers. Okay, I'll tell her. I hope you know what you're up against. Hastings. He's not alone. Carter gently squeezed her shoulder. We know. Thank you for your courage. She hurried away, back into the shadows of the alley. Carter sensed someone watching. The group discreetly scanned the area. On the far side of the street, a dark silhouette lingered near a lamppost. Possibly just a drunk, possibly a lookout, hard to tell. They quickly returned to their vehicles, engines silent, slipping into the night. Back at the abandoned shop, Edgar and Jesse had arrived, along with two more people. A wiry man with oil-stained hands and a middle-aged woman in a flannel jacket. Edgar introduced them as folks who'd had run-ins with Hastings. They each recounted a story of extortion, intimidation, or wrongful arrest. Davis recorded it all, camera capturing faces, voices, tears. The woman in flannel trembled with repressed rage as she described how Hastings seized her farmland after she couldn't pay bogus violation fees. The wiry mechanic said Hastings demanded monthly kickbacks to keep his auto shop off the radar. Carter listened, fists clenched at the injustice. So this was the real tyranny behind the badge. People either paid up or faced ruin. Edgar watched from the corner, eyes brimming with helpless fury. When they finished, Davis uploaded everything to a secure server. Mills double-checked the footage. We've got hours of testimony, enough to spark an official investigation. But we need to connect it directly to Hastings, not just circumstantial. Proof of him personally extorting or assaulting. That's where Nina or Jesse come in. Jesse nodded, voice quivering. He assaulted me. I can identify him in a lineup. I can show the bruises. Davis gave her a sympathetic look. That'll help. We can also gather your medical records. The night deepened. They set up sleeping arrangements. Mats on the floor, an old couch for Edgar and Jesse. Carter took first watch, patrolling the perimeter of the building every hour. Tension lay thick in the air. Sometime around 3 a.m., a pair of headlights swept the distant road, slowed, then passed on. Possibly a random traveler, or possibly Hastings's men, scouring for them. Carter remained vigilant until dawn broke, pale and quiet. Morning brought a sense of fresh determination. Agent Price texted, requesting a meeting at a small cafe near the highway. Carter left Davis and Mills to guard the makeshift safe house, then drove out alone to see what the DOJ had come up with overnight. Price was at a corner booth wearing casual clothes but emanating a sharp, focused energy. She waved Carter over, leaning in once Carter sat. I spoke with the local interim sheriff, Mills. Same name, but definitely no relation to your associate. He stonewalled me. Claimed that any allegations against Hastings are the result of outsiders stirring the pot. We both know that's bull. Carter exhaled. We have multiple witness statements, recorded on video. If you can get us a subpoena for station records, that might break this open. She nodded thoughtfully. The issue is the local judge. If he's compromised, we might need a federal judge from out of district. That could take days. We also need probable cause that the station's records are being altered or withheld. Hunches aren't enough. Carter's jaw tightened. We might have no choice but to gather physical evidence ourselves. Price frowned. You're talking infiltration, aren't you? You sure you want to go that route? One slip and you could be facing charges yourself. This is dicey. Carter studied her face. What's your alternative? Wait while Hastings covers his tracks? She let out a slow breath. All right, if you do anything, do it carefully. If you get caught, you never heard it from me. A reluctant alliance. Carter finished the coffee, paying at the counter, then parted ways with Price. The clock was ticking. If Hastings got wind of the mounting evidence, he might vanish or double down. Carter wasn't sure which was worse. That afternoon, Nina texted the diner manager, who relayed a message. Nina would come to the mechanic shop at midnight to share her testimony. Carter returned to pass along the news. Davis was systematically organizing the videos, creating a dossier for Agent Price. Mills was ensuring the safe house perimeter was watched. Edgar sat with Jesse, both looking more hopeful now than an actual plan was forming. Night descended, and with it came the tension of waiting. Midnight approached. Nina arrived, trembling, wearing a hooded sweatshirt pulled low over her face. She gave a shaky account of Hastings cornering her after a late shift, forcibly searching her car, verbally abusing her, accusing her of dealing drugs unless she cooperated. Her voice cracked multiple times. Carter gently reassured her. Davis filmed everything. When it ended, Nina rubbed her arms, tears streaking her cheeks. "I just want to be free of him. My life was normal until he started pulling me over for no reason, making threats." Carter offered a firm nod. "You did the right thing. We'll protect you." Nina mustered a grateful smile, though fear lingered in her eyes. She left and they uploaded her testimony. It was the final piece. Direct, incriminating, impossible to spin as a misunderstanding. That was enough for Price to push the feds. Carter sent her the files with an urgent note. Moments later, a phone call came in from Price's secure line. "This is gold," she said, voice subdued excitement. "I'll bounce it to my superiors tonight. Expect a response by morning." Carter ended the call, adrenaline surging. They were so close. Now it became a matter of who moved first, the law or Hastings. True to form, Hastings made the next move. Around 2 a.m., a thunder of engines rumbled down the deserted road. Carter, on watch by the shop's window, spotted 4 vehicles, 2 patrol cars, 2 black SUVs, pulling up. Headlights lit the area like a stage. Car doors slammed, voices barked orders. Carter recognized Hastings' silhouette. So, he discovered the hideout, or tracked Nina there. A wave of dread swept the people inside. Edgar paced, hand on an old revolver. Jesse's face paled. Nina whimpered softly. Davis and Mills grabbed gear, checking earpieces. Carter motioned everyone to hush. The only advantage was that inside these walls, they controlled the vantage. The locked, bolted door was strong and the windows were boarded. They could hold out a short time. Hastings' voice boomed from outside, amplified by a megaphone. "We know you're in there. Come out with your hands up, or we'll come in." Silence stretched. Carter signaled Davis to start recording on a hidden camera. Another voice, maybe the other deputy, shouted that they had warrants. Carter doubted any real judge had signed them in the middle of the night. This was intimidation. Davis whispered urgently, "We can't just let them storm in. They'll destroy our gear." Carter weighed the options. Agent Price was the only real chance at official backup, but she might not get there in time. The feds would move eventually, but maybe not within minutes. Meanwhile, Hastings had them cornered, unless they turned the tables somehow. Carter squared shoulders. "We do this carefully. I'll talk to him." Ignoring pleas to be cautious, Carter opened a narrow side window, stepping into partial view. "Deputy Hastings, you have no legal basis to be here. We're unarmed civilians under the protection of federal law. Any attempt to enter will be recorded and used against you." A tense hush fell. Then Hastings responded. "Federal law? You're not in D.C., soldier boy. You're in my county. We have multiple vehicles describing break-ins and suspicious gatherings here. Now, open the door." Carter gritted teeth. "You and I both know that's fabricated. You come in here, you break more than just the law. You break your future." "Shut your mouth," Hastings snarled. "This is your last warning." Engines idled, men shouting at each other. Carter ducked back, turning to the group. "We have to hold out. Price will come, or we gather enough evidence of them forcing entry. Then no judge can save him." As if on cue, the door shuddered from a heavy impact. Someone kicking it. The battered wood creaked but held. Another slam. Shouts. Jesse cowered behind Edgar, who leveled the revolver at the door with trembling hands. Davis steadied a camera, capturing everything. The next blow splintered the frame. Carter cursed under breath. They had no choice. If they let them in, Hastings might harm or even kill them under the guise of resistance. Carter had seen it overseas too many times. But then distant sirens wailed. Everyone froze. Through the broken doorframe, Carter glimpsed swirling red and blue lights. Hastings whipped around. Furious confusion etched on his face. Another set of vehicles roared onto the scene, but these had the official federal insignia. Agent Price hopped out first, a bulletproof vest strapped over her jacket. She raised a bullhorn. "This is Agent Price with the Department of Justice. All local law enforcement on this scene are ordered to stand down immediately." Hastings pivoted, face twisted with rage. "This is my jurisdiction, lady." She advanced, flanked by 2 federal agents. "Not anymore. We have credible reports of civil rights violations, unlawful detentions, and abuse of authority. Put your weapon on the ground, deputy." Behind Hastings, the small army of local officers hesitated, glancing between him and the federal agents. Another agent stepped forward, brandishing a document. "We have a federal warrant to detain any officer obstructing this investigation. Comply now or face arrest." Hastings raged, fists clenched. For a moment, Carter feared he'd draw his sidearm on the feds. But multiple rifles were trained on him. Finally, he spat on the ground. "Traitors!" He dropped his weapon, letting it clatter against the concrete. One by one, the other officers followed suit, some with evident relief. Agent Price signaled the group inside the shop. Carter led Nina, Jesse, Edgar, and the others out. Flashlights glinted off tear-streaked faces and shaky limbs. The federal agents, though stern, offered comfort, ushering them aside for statements. Price locked eyes with Carter, nodded in relief. "You okay?" Carter exhaled, adrenaline crashing. "We are now." From the corner, Hastings glowered, forcibly cuffed by 2 federal officers. He caught Carter's gaze. Hatred radiated in his glare. "This isn't over. My people will bury you." Carter approached calmly, meeting his eyes without flinching. "No, deputy. It's over for you." Price stepped between them, guiding Carter back. "He'll be booked in a federal facility, pending charges. We also got word that your recorded evidence is already in the hands of a federal judge. Hastings's protective shield is gone." As they led Hastings away, Carter saw fear flicker behind his anger. Without his badge, without the local connections, he was just another man who had to answer for his crimes. The crowd of officers parted. Some looked ashamed, others scowled defiantly. 1 or 2 quietly admitted they'd been forced to comply under threats. The system was unraveling. In the following days, the FBI arrived in force, rummaging through the precinct, collecting files, placing multiple deputies and even the interim sheriff under investigation. Statements from Nina, Jesse, and the others were taken, formally, under federal protection. The media caught wind, reporters descending on the small town, shining a spotlight on years of unpunished corruption. Carter found it odd to become a reluctant symbol of justice. The mission concluded not with a firefight, but with a cascade of indictments. A week later, Carter stood on the county courthouse steps, flanked by Agent Price and Colonel Anders. Hastings and several cohorts had just been arraigned, the judge transferring their cases to a federal circuit court. The press swarmed, cameras clicking. Carter gave a short statement emphasizing the bravery of the locals who'd come forward, refusing to hog any glory. Edgar and Jesse watched from the sidelines, tears in their eyes. Nina, hidden under witness protection, sent a quiet message of gratitude. The media moved on eventually, hungry for the next story. But the townspeople felt the change. Badges no longer carried the same terror. A new sheriff was appointed by the state to oversee the transitional period. Carter stayed a few more days, ensuring the pieces were in place for the community to heal. Each time an old neighbor or business owner approached to say thanks, Carter merely reminded them that none of it would have been possible if they hadn't bravely come forward. Finally, with the dusty job done, Carter loaded the SUV for the trip out of town. The road ahead was open, the sky bright and boundless. Edgar shook Carter's hand, tears glinting. "You've given us our lives back," he whispered. Carter smiled softly. "All I did was show up. You stood for yourselves." They parted, and Carter drove away, heart lighter than it had been in a while. Some battles were fought on foreign soil, under blazing sun and shifting dunes. Others were fought here at home, in quiet towns overshadowed by corruption. Both demanded courage, both demanded resolve. And if this mission proved anything, it was that tyranny crumbles when good people unite. Back at a rest stop miles down the highway, Carter stepped out to stretch. Memories drifted. Hastings's sneer, the frightened faces of Nina and Jesse, the final moment he was led away in cuffs. Carter allowed a rare moment of satisfaction. The phone buzzed. Another message from Colonel Anders praising the operation's success. Carter typed a quick thanks, then paused to reflect. This victory was part of a larger cause, an ongoing fight for justice in places where the strong preyed on the weak. There would always be more work to do, but for now, Carter could breathe easier. Climbing back into the SUV, Carter drove into the horizon, prepared for whatever might come next. Because for those devoted to defending the defenseless, the road never truly ended. In the weeks that followed, news outlets ran exposés on Hastings, detailing how he'd manipulated the system for personal gain, subjugated the town under fear, and systematically crushed dissent. More victims stepped forward with stories of property seized, fines invented, and innocence stolen. The trial date was set. Federal prosecutors compiled a slam-dunk case, citing violation of civil rights, conspiracy, extortion, and assault. Hastings's once loyal cronies turned on him, striking plea deals in exchange for leniency. In the end, he stood alone, facing a litany of charges that virtually guaranteed a lengthy prison sentence. Carter, back at home base in another state, received periodic updates from Agent Price. Each one carried the same message: Hastings was finished. The community, though bruised, began to rebuild trust in law enforcement under a new regime. Nina moved freely now, working her shifts without harassment. Jesse was undergoing therapy, healing from the trauma. Edgar's health improved, relieved of the daily stress that once weighed him down. The local diner thrived with customers who no longer feared arbitrary stops on the drive home. Life moved forward. And Carter? Another call came from Colonel Anders, offering a quiet commendation from higher-ups who recognized the importance of the mission. Carter accepted the thanks humbly, reminded them that the real heroes were the townspeople. Then life resumed, day by day, with the quiet knowledge that in one corner of America, the flame of justice burned a little brighter, because fear had finally been conquered. Corruption thrives in darkness, fed by silence and fear. It crumbles under the unwavering light of collective courage. Even the most entrenched power structures are vulnerable when confronted by truth, integrity, and a willingness to stand up for what's right. This story is a testament to that principle, that one person's steadfast resolve, combined with community voices and external support, can break the back of tyranny. We learn that no badge, no position, no network of cronies is impermeable to the law when the right people unite. Ultimately, true authority arises from service, not from intimidation. And in every conflict, whether on distant battlefields or on a quiet American roadside, the real victory is not just the defeat of one corrupt individual, but the restoration of hope and the promise that justice, though sometimes delayed, cannot be silenced forever. This tale will likely stir debate. Some might argue about the extent of federal authority, the line between justifiable suspicion and police overreach, the role of public activism, or even whether Carter should have taken direct infiltration measures. Others may dispute the moral ramifications. When is it righteous to retaliate, and when is it best to comply? But that very tension sparks conversation, compelling us to examine our own beliefs about power, accountability, and individual responsibility. In the end, no matter the disagreements, the truth remains: in a just society, no one stands above the law, and no one stands alone when defending what is right.